The slap echoed across the marble hall like a gunshot. 300 witnesses, one Mafia boss, and me, standing in a wedding dress I never wanted to wear, my palms still burning from the impact. Salvatore Bianchi's head had snapped to the side, a red mark blooming across his cheek. For 3 seconds, nobody breathed. The orchestra froze mid-note. Champagne glasses hung suspended in the air. Even the city outside seemed to hold its breath. Then his eyes met mine. Cold, dark, and utterly unreadable. He stepped closer, his voice so soft, only I could hear it, each word precise as a blade. "You'll regret that. You're not leaving this city. Not tonight, not ever." I should have been terrified. Instead, I smiled, a genuine smile, sharp and defiant, and whispered back, "Watch me. That was 4 hours ago. Now I'm running for my life. My name is Isabella Moretti, and I made the biggest mistake of my life today. Or maybe the most intelligent decision I've ever made. I'm still not sure which. The wedding was supposed to be perfect. My mother had spent 18 months planning every detail, the hand-carved ice sculptures, the imported Italian marble for the aisle, the dress that cost more than most people's cars. She'd organized it like a military campaign. Because in our world, marriages aren't about love. They're about alliances. Salvatore Bianchi controlled the north side of the city. My father controlled the south. Together, they'd be unstoppable. And I was the bridge between their empires, gift-wrapped in white silk and resigned to my fate. I'd known Salvatore since we were teenagers. Back then, he'd been different, quick to laugh, his eyes warm instead of calculating. We'd dated briefly before his father died, and he inherited an empire built on fear and blood money. Before he became Salvatore Bianchi, the man whose name made grown men flinch, he'd proposed 6 months ago in front of both our families. I hadn't been asked. I'd been told. My father's hand on my shoulder, his grip just tight enough to bruise. "Say yes, Isabella." So I did. The engagement had been a performance. Every dinner, every public appearance, every carefully staged photograph, all of it designed to show the city that we were united. In private, Salvatore was different, colder, more distant. He'd look at me sometimes like I was a chess piece he was deciding where to position, but I played along. What choice did I have? The wedding day arrived like an execution date. I stood in the bridal suite, looking at my reflection. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, perfect lie. My mother kissed my cheek and told me I looked beautiful. My father told me I was making the family proud. Neither asked if I was happy. I walked down that aisle like I was walking to my own funeral. The church was stunning. All gold and white roses, sunlight streaming through stained glass. The guests were the cream of the city's society, along with every major player in both our family's organizations. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a merger, a hostile takeover of my life. Salvatore waited at the altar in a custom Tom Ford suit, looking every inch the powerful man he'd become. Handsome, dangerous, untouchable. He took my hand, his grip firm and cold, and I felt the cage door swing shut. The priest began the ceremony. I barely heard the words. I was too busy calculating exits, counting guards, and wondering if I could make it to the door before someone stopped me. But I didn't run. I stood there, numb, and said the words I was supposed to say. I do. The applause was thunderous. Salvatore kissed me, brief, perfunctory, claiming his prize. We walked back down the aisle together, his hand at my waist, proprietary and possessive. The reception was already underway, the party of the year, and I was the star of a show I'd never auditioned for. We danced. We smiled. We received congratulations from people who were more interested in our union's business implications than our happiness. I drank champagne I didn't taste, laughed at jokes that weren't funny, and felt myself disappearing, piece by piece. Then came the toasts. Salvatore's best man. Carlo, a man with dead eyes and a reputation for making problems disappear, stood and raised his glass. He spoke about loyalty, about family, about the bright future ahead. The crowd cheered. Salvatore nodded, accepting the praise as his due. Then Salvatore stood, pulling me up beside him. The crowd quieted, waiting for his speech. He turned to me, his hand still at my waist, his smile perfect for the cameras. But when he leaned in close, his lips near my ear, his voice was ice. "You're mine now, Isabella. Everything you are, everything you'll ever be, it all belongs to me. You'll learn to love me, or you'll learn to obey. Either way, you're not going anywhere." Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the champagne. Perhaps it was the weight of all those months of suffocating under expectations. Maybe it was just the final, unbearable realization that this was my life now. Pretty and powerless, a trophy on his arm. I turned to face him, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. 300 people are watching. Cameras recording. My mother's warning voice in my head. "Smile, darling. Don't make a scene." I looked into Salvatore's eyes. Those cold, certain eyes. And I slapped him as hard as I could. The sound cracked through the ballroom like lightning. For a moment, the world stopped. Salvatore's head turned from the force of it, a red handprint blooming on his cheek. His eyes went wide with shock, then narrowed to slits of pure fury. I could feel my mother's horror from across the room, my father's rage building like a storm, but I didn't care. I leaned in close, my voice shaking but clear. "I'm not yours. I'm not anyone's, and you can't make me stay." Then I grabbed the train of my dress and ran. I made it 3 blocks before I realized I had nowhere to go. I stood in an alley, gasping for breath, the reality of what I'd done crashing over me like a wave. I'd just humiliated Salvatore Bianchi in front of the entire city. I'd destroyed my family's alliance. I'd probably started a war, and I'd never felt more alive. My phone exploded with notifications, calls from my mother, my father, people whose names I didn't even recognize. I ignored them all except one, Lucia. My oldest friend was the only person I trusted completely. Her text was short. "Holy shit. Where are you? Are you safe?" I typed back with shaking fingers. "I don't know. I need help." Her response came immediately. "Stay where you are." "I'm coming." I waited in that alley, every sound making me jump, every pair of headlights a potential threat. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by cold, creeping fear. What had I done? Salvatore wasn't the kind of man you could easily embarrass and then walk away from. He was the kind of man who made examples of people. Lucia found me 20 minutes later, pulling up in her beat-up Honda, her eyes wide with worry and something like admiration. "Get in. Now." I climbed in, and she peeled away from the curb, checking her mirrors constantly. "Are you insane?" she demanded, but she was smiling. That was the most badass thing I've ever seen. Also, possibly the stupidest. "I know," I said, my voice breaking. "I know, but I just couldn't do it anymore, Lucia. I couldn't pretend to be okay with being owned." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "I know. But Isabella, you don't understand what you've started. Salvatore called your father. They're looking everywhere for you. Every hotel, every train station, every place you've ever been. He's furious." "Good," I said, and meant it. Lucia took me to her apartment, a small studio in a neighborhood Salvatore's people rarely visited. She made tea while I peeled off the wedding dress, the beautiful prison I'd worn all day. I stood in her bathroom in my slip, looking at my reflection. My makeup was smeared, my hair was falling, and I looked wild, free. "What's your plan?" Lucia asked when I emerged in borrowed clothes, jeans and a sweater that felt like armor after the delicate silk. "I don't have one," I admitted. "I just knew I had to get out." She looked at me seriously. "You know he won't let this go, right? Men like Salvatore don't forgive public humiliation. He'll come for you, and when he does, I know." I sat down heavily on her couch. "But I can't go back. I won't. We spent the next hour planning. Lucia had a friend, Marco, who'd left the city years ago after falling out with Salvatore. If anyone could help me disappear, it was him. But getting to Marco meant getting out of the city, and Salvatore had eyes everywhere. "I'll make some calls," Lucia said. "But Isabella, you need to understand something. If you do this, if you really run, you're burning every bridge. Your family, your old life, everything. There's no coming back from this." I thought about my mother's perfectly planned life for me, my father's expectations. The cage I'd been born into was gilded and suffocating. I thought about Salvatore's hand at my waist, his voice in my ear, his absolute certainty that I belonged to him. I'm already gone, I said. What I didn't know was that at that exact moment, Salvatore was making plans of his own. Salvatore Bianchi sat in his office, a glass of whiskey in his hand, watching the video for the 20th time. Isabella, his wife of 3 hours, was slapping him in front of everyone who mattered, the sound. The guests' faces showed shock, the red mark on his cheek, his own stunned expression before the fury took over. Carlo stood in the corner, waiting for orders. We've got men at every exit from the city, train stations, bus depots, and the airport. We'll find her. I know you will. Salvatore's voice was quiet. Dangerous. Carlo shifted. What do you want us to do when we find her? Salvatore looked up, his eyes cold. Bring her to me. Unharmed. Anyone who touches her answers to me personally. After Carlo left, Salvatore stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city he controlled. His city. Where nothing happened without his knowledge, where his word was law. But he couldn't control Isabella. He thought back to when they'd first met, 15 years ago at some family gathering. She'd been 13, all sharp edges and fierce eyes, arguing passionately about something he couldn't remember. He'd been 16 and already being groomed to take over his father's empire, learning that power mattered more than anything else. They'd dated briefly in college. She'd made him laugh and made him feel like maybe there was more to life than the family business. Then his father died, and everything changed. He had enemies to crush, territories to secure, and a reputation to build. He'd pushed Isabella away, telling himself it was for her own good, that she deserved better than the life he was inheriting. But he'd never forgotten her. When the opportunity came to unite their families, he'd pushed for it. Told himself it was strategic, a smart business move. But the truth, the part he'd never admitted even to himself, was that he wanted her back. Wanted another chance. He'd just gone about it all wrong. The engagement had been cold and formal because he didn't know how else to be anymore. He'd learned to see everything as a transaction, everyone as either an asset or a threat. He'd treated Isabella like a business deal rather than a woman, and viewed her as a possession rather than a person. And when she'd stood up there at the reception, defiant and beautiful, and slapped him, he'd felt something crack inside him. Rage, yes. Humiliation, absolutely. But also something else. Something that felt almost like pride. She'd fought back. In front of everyone, she'd shown him exactly what he'd been trying to bury. Isabella Moretti wasn't someone you owned. She was someone you earned, but he'd said the words anyway. Threatened her. Tried to assert control he knew he'd already lost. Now she was gone. His phone rang. His mother. Salvatore. Her voice was sharp. The entire city is talking about what happened. You need to fix this. Find her. Please bring her back. Make her apologize publicly. No. Silence on the other end. His mother wasn't used to being contradicted. Excuse me? I said no, Mother. This isn't about public relations. This is about Isabella. Isabella humiliated you. Isabella stood up for herself. Maybe I deserved it. More silence. Then carefully, what are you saying? Salvatore stared at the frozen frame on his screen. Isabella's face, fierce and unafraid. I'm saying I've been doing this wrong. All of it. Salvatore, you can't show weakness, not now. Every rival we have is watching to see how you handle this. Then they'll see me handle it my way. He hung up. Carlo returned an hour later with news. We found someone who saw her. She's with Lucia Ramos. We have the address. Salvatore stood, grabbing his jacket. I'm going alone. Boss, that's not... I'm going alone, he repeated, his voice leaving no room for argument. Have men nearby, but they stay in their cars unless I call. This isn't a raid. It's a conversation. Carlo looked skeptical but nodded. Salvatore drove through the city, his mind racing. He'd spent the last 6 months trying to control Isabella, trying to mold her into the perfect wife for a mafia boss. He'd been so focused on the image, the alliance, the strategy, that he'd forgotten the most important thing. He'd fallen in love with her because she was fierce. Because she challenged him. Because she was the only person who'd ever looked at him and seen past the power to the man underneath. And then he'd tried to break exactly what he loved about her. He pulled up outside Lucia's building. his security detail parking half a block away. He sat in the car for a moment, trying to figure out what to say. "I'm sorry" seemed inadequate. "Come back" sounded like another command. I was wrong, but not enough. He got out of the car and walked to the door. I heard the knock and froze. Lucia looked through the peephole, then turned to me, her face pale. "It's him." My heart stopped. Salvatore? Alone, no guards visible. Alone. That didn't make sense. Men like Salvatore didn't travel alone, especially not when hunting someone who'd embarrassed them. I moved to the window, peering down at the street. Sure enough, I could see the black SUVs parked down the block, but they weren't moving. "This wasn't a raid. Don't open it," I said. "He can't force his way in." "We can call the police and tell them what?" Lucia asked gently. "Is your husband wanting to talk to you?" "Isabella, he's not breaking any laws by standing in my hallway." Another knock, then Salvatore's voice, muffled through the door. "Isabella, please, I want to talk." 5 minutes. If you want me to leave after that, I'll leave." I'd never heard him say please before. Not once. Lucia looked at me. "It's your call." Every instinct screamed at me to run. To climb out of the fire escape and disappear into the night. But I'd spent too many months running from conversations I needed to have. And something in his voice, the rawness, the lack of command, made me hesitate. "I'll do it," I said. "But I need you in the room." Lucia nodded and opened the door. Salvatore stood in the hallway, and for a moment, I barely recognized him. His jacket was rumpled, his tie loosened, and his hair fell across his forehead instead of being perfectly styled. The red mark from my slap had faded to a faint shadow, but the look in his eyes was something I'd never seen before. Vulnerable. He looked at me, then at Lucia, then back to me. "Thank you for opening the door. I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure I would either," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I stood behind Lucia's couch, using it as a barrier between us. "You have 5 minutes." He stepped inside, and Lucia closed the door behind him but stayed close to it, her arms crossed, her expression protective. Salvatore noticed, and something flickered in his eyes. Approval, maybe, or respect. "I owe you an apology," he said, and the words sounded like they cost him something, not just for tonight, for everything. For the last 6 months, for treating you like a business arrangement instead of a person. I wanted to interrupt, to throw his words back at him, but something made me wait. He looked like a man trying to find language for feelings he'd spent years burying. "When my father died," he continued, his voice rough, "I was 23 years old. I inherited an empire built on violence and fear, surrounded by men waiting for me to show weakness so they could take it from me. I learned fast that sentiment was dangerous, that caring about anything made you vulnerable. So I stopped. I became what I needed to be to survive." He took a step closer, and I tensed, but he stopped when he saw my reaction. "I pushed you away back then because I thought I was protecting you. I told myself you deserved better than the life I was building, but the truth is, I was protecting myself because you were the only person who made me feel like I could be something other than this." He gestured at himself, at the expensive suit, the power he wore like armor. Then, when our families wanted to unite, I thought it was fate, a second chance. But I'd forgotten how to be anything but what I'd become. I treated our engagement like a merger. I treated you like an asset to be acquired. And tonight, when I told you that you were mine..." He closed his eyes, his jaw clenching. I became exactly what I'd spent years trying not to be. I became my father. The silence stretched between us, heavy with years of unspoken words. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," Salvatore said, opening his eyes to meet mine. "I'm not asking you to come back. I'm asking you to let me do what I should have done 6 months ago. Let me actually talk to you. Let me hear what you want. Let me see if there's any way I can be the man you deserve instead of the man I thought I needed to be." I felt tears burning in my eyes, and I hated them, hated showing any weakness. "You threatened me," I said, my voice breaking. "You told me I'd never leave this city. You told me I'd learn to obey. I know." His voice was barely a whisper, and I regret those words more than anything I've ever said. I was angry and humiliated, and I lashed out. But the moment you walked away, the moment I saw you actually leave, I realized something. He ran his hand through his hair, destroying what was left of his perfect appearance. I realized I'd rather have you hate me and be free than love me and be trapped. Lucia shifted beside the door, and I could feel her watching me, waiting to see what I would do. I sent Carlo to every exit from the city, Salvatore continued. I had men watching train stations and bus depots. I tracked you down here, but I came alone because I needed you to know. I'm not here to drag you back. I'm here to tell you that you were right. You're not mine. You're not anyone's. You're your own person, and you deserve to make your own choices. Then why come at all? I demanded, anger flaring through my tears. Why send your men to watch the exits? Why track me down if you're going to let me go? Because I'm selfish, he said. Because I love you, and I needed to tell you that before you disappeared. Because I needed you to know that if you choose to walk away, it's not because I didn't fight for you. It's because I finally learned to fight for you the right way. The words hung in the air like smoke. I stared at him, searching his face for the lie, for the manipulation I'd learned to expect. But all I saw was exhaustion, honesty, and a desperate kind of hope. You don't know what love is, I said, but my voice wavered. You know possession. You know control. You know how to make people do what you want. You're right, he agreed, and the admission seemed to hurt him. I don't know what love is. Not really. My father loved my mother by locking her in a golden cage and calling it protection. That's the only model I had. But I know what love isn't. It isn't commands. It isn't ownership. It isn't taking away someone's choices. He took a shaky breath. And I know that what I felt when I saw you walk down that aisle wasn't triumph. It was terror, because I knew you didn't want to be there. And I knew I was complicit in forcing you anyway. Lucia spoke for the first time, her voice careful. What exactly are you proposing here, Salvatore? He looked at her, then back at me. I'm proposing I annul the marriage, publicly. I'll tell everyone the truth, that I forced Isabella into something she didn't want, and that I was wrong. I'll deal with the fallout from both families. I'll make sure she's free. My heart was hammering. And then what? And then... He swallowed hard. And then I'd like the chance to start over. Not as an arranged marriage. Not as a business deal. Just as two people who used to care about each other, seeing if there's anything left worth saving. But only if you want that. Only if you choose it. I laughed, a bitter sound. You think it's that simple? You think you can erase 6 months of treating me like property with one apology? No, his voice was firm. I think it'll take years. I think I'll have to prove every day that I've changed. I think you have every right to tell me to go to hell and never look back. But I also think... He paused, his eyes locked on mine. I think the woman who slapped me in front of 300 people is the bravest person I've ever met. And I think she deserves someone who celebrates that courage instead of trying to break it. The silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Behind me was the familiar territory of anger and justified rage. Ahead was uncertain ground, the possibility of something new built on the ruins of what we'd destroyed. Lucia touched my arm gently. I'll be in the bedroom. Take your time. She disappeared, leaving Salvatore and me alone. I sat down on the couch, suddenly exhausted. Salvatore stayed standing, keeping distance between us, respecting the boundary I'd created. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I don't trust you, I said finally. I know. I don't believe that people change. That's fair. And I'm still angry. So angry I can barely breathe sometimes. You have every right to be. I looked up at him. This man I'd thought I knew. This stranger wearing a familiar face. If I even consider this, and I'm not saying I am, things would have to be completely different. No more commands. No more decisions made for me. No more treating me like I'm something you own. Agreed. I'd need time, space, the freedom to walk away at any moment if I decide this isn't working. Whatever you need. And I'd need proof. Real proof that you've changed. Not words. Actions. Salvatore nodded slowly, and for the first time, I saw a hint of hope in his eyes. I can do that. I want to do that. Just tell me where to start. I thought about it, about what would actually prove he was serious. An idea formed, dangerous and bold. The annulment. Please do it publicly, like you said, but I also want you to explain why. I want you to tell the entire city that you were wrong, that you tried to force me into something I didn't want, That you're sorry. I saw him flinch. For a man like Salvatore, public vulnerability was worse than any physical threat. Admitting fault in front of the families, the business partners, the rivals who were always circling, it would be seen as weakness. It could cost him. Okay, he said quietly. You understand what that means? I pressed. Your enemies will use it against you. Your own people might question your leadership. Your mother will be furious. I understand. And I'll do it anyway. He met my eyes. Because you're right. If I want you to believe I've changed, I need to prove it. And words are easy. It's the hard things that matter. I studied him, looking for the catch, the angle, the manipulation. But all I saw was a man who'd finally realized what he stood to lose. There's something else, I said. I need you to understand that even if I give you a chance, even if we try to start over, I might still decide to leave. This might not work. And if that happens, you have to let me go. Really, let me go. No threats. No tracking me down. No, using your power to make my life difficult. The words clearly pained him, but he nodded. If you choose to leave, I'll let you go. You have my word. Your word didn't mean much this afternoon. I know. His voice was raw, but it's all I have to give you right now. My word, and my promise that I'll spend every day trying to become someone whose word actually means something to you. I stood up, my legs shaky, and walked to the window. The city stretched out below, Salvatore's city, the place I'd been born and raised. I'd spent the last few hours seeing it as a prison, every street a cage, every corner hiding his men. But maybe it didn't have to be his city. Perhaps it could just be the city, my home if I choose it. I'm not coming back tonight, I said, still looking out the window. I'm staying here with Lucia, and tomorrow I'm going to spend the day doing whatever I want, going wherever I want without looking over my shoulder. If you're serious about change, your men will leave me alone. They will. I'll call them off tonight. I turned to face him. And then, in a few days, when I've had time to think, maybe we can meet somewhere neutral. Somewhere public. And we can talk. Really talk. Not about business or families or alliances. Just about us. About whether there's an us worth fighting for. Something that looked like relief flooded his features. Wherever you want. Whenever you're ready. This doesn't mean I forgive you, I said firmly. This doesn't mean everything's okay. This means I'm willing to see if you're capable of change. That's all I'm offering. That's more than I deserve. He moved toward the door, then paused, his hand on the knob. Isabella? What? That slap? That moment when you stood up for yourself? A small, genuine smile crossed his face. That's when I realized I'd fallen in love with you all over again. This is not the version I was trying to create. The real you. The fierce, unbreakable you. He left before I could respond, the door closing softly behind him. I stood there shaking, my emotions a tangled mess of anger and hope and fear, and something I didn't want to name yet. Lucia emerged from the bedroom, wrapping her arms around me. You okay? She asked. I don't know, I admitted. I don't know if I'm making the biggest mistake of my life, or the bravest choice I've ever made. Maybe it's both, she said gently. Maybe the bravest choices always feel like mistakes until they don't. We stood there together, watching through the window as Salvatore climbed into his car. I saw him make a phone call, and then the SUVs down the block pulled away into the night. He was keeping his word at least about this. Do you think people can really change? I asked. Lucia was quiet for a moment. I think people can change if they want to badly enough. The question is whether Salvatore wants to change because he loves you, or because he wants to win you back. Those are two very different things. How do I know which it is? Time, she said. Time and watching his actions, not his words. 3 days passed. True to his word, Salvatore's men vanished from my life. No one followed me as I walked through the city. No one watched Lucia's apartment. My phone stopped exploding with messages from my family, and I learned later that Salvatore had personally told both our families to give me space. I spent those 3 days rediscovering what freedom felt like. I went to my favorite cafe and sat for hours reading without looking over my shoulder. I visited the art museum I loved, where I stood in front of paintings until my feet ached. I strolled through the park at sunset, letting the city's beauty envelop me without filtering it through the lens of who controlled which neighborhood. Lucia gave me space, but was always there when I needed to talk. We stayed up late those nights, drinking wine and discussing everything. Salvatore, the wedding, the future, what I actually wanted from my life. The thing is, I told her on the second night, I'm not even sure if what I felt for him was real or just conditioning. I was raised to believe that marriage to someone powerful was the best future I could hope for. How do I know if I actually loved him, or if I just accepted what I was told to want? Maybe it was both, Lucia suggested. Maybe you loved him despite the conditioning, not because of it. Maybe that's why it hurt so much when he tried to control you, because you'd hoped he'd be different. On the morning of the fourth day, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up the phone. Isabella. It was Salvatore's assistant, Maria. Mr. Bianchi asked me to call. He's scheduled a press conference for this afternoon at 2:00. He wanted you to know, in case you wanted to watch. My heart started pounding. What's it about? The annulment, Miss Moretti. He's making a public statement. I thanked her and hung up, my hands shaking. Lucia emerged from the kitchen with coffee, took one look at my face and said, What happened? He's doing it. The press conference. Today. We spent the next few hours in front of Lucia's laptop, watching the news coverage of the building. The speculation was wild. Some reporters thought Salvatore was going to demand my return. Others thought he was going to denounce me publicly. No one expected what actually happened. At precisely 2:00, Salvatore stepped up to a podium outside his office building, facing a sea of cameras and reporters. He looked composed, powerful, every inch the Mafia boss, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands gripped the podium. Thank you for coming, he began. I'm here to make an announcement regarding my marriage to Isabella Moretti 4 days ago. As you all know by now, the reception ended, unexpectedly. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter from the press. Salvatore didn't smile. What you don't know is why. And what I'm here to tell you today is that Isabella was right to walk away. She was right to refuse to accept the situation I'd put her in. The crowd went silent, sensing something unprecedented. For the last 6 months, I've treated my relationship with Isabella as a business arrangement. I made decisions without consulting her. I prioritized alliances and appearances over her feelings and her autonomy. I told myself I was building something strong, but what I was actually doing was trying to control someone who should never be controlled. I watched, barely breathing, as Salvatore continued. Isabella Moretti is one of the strongest, smartest, most courageous people I've ever known. Instead of honoring those qualities, I tried to suppress them. I tried to mold her into what I thought a wife should be, rather than celebrating who she truly is. That was wrong. I was wrong. He paused, and I could see him gathering courage for what came next. So I'm here to announce that I'm filing for an annulment of our marriage, not because Isabella did anything wrong, but because I did. Because she deserves the freedom to choose her own life, her own path, her own future. And if that future doesn't include me, I'll accept that. The press erupted with questions, but Salvatore held up his hand. I also want to say something directly to Isabella, wherever she is. I know you're probably watching this, and I want you to know that I'm sorry. Truly sorry. Not sorry that you embarrassed me, you didn't. I embarrassed myself by treating you the way I did. I'm sorry for every moment I made you feel like you weren't in control of your own life. I'm sorry for the threats I made. And I'm sorry it took losing you to realize what I should have known from the beginning, that you were never something to be won or owned. You're someone to be earned, someone to be worthy of. My vision blurred with tears. Lucia squeezed my hand. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Salvatore continued, his voice rough with emotion. I'm not asking for another chance, though I hope someday you might give me one. I'm just asking you to know that you changed me. That slap, and here he almost smiled, woke me up. It made me see what I'd become, what I'd lost. He took a breath, and I could see his hands trembling slightly on the podium. To everyone else watching, to our families, to our business associates, to anyone who thinks this makes me weak, I want to be clear. The strongest thing I've ever done isn't building an empire or winning territory or making people fear my name. The strongest thing I've ever done is standing here and admitting I was wrong. And if you think that's weakness, then you don't understand what real strength is. He looked directly into the camera, and for a moment it felt like he was looking at me. Isabella, if you're willing, I'd like to meet with you. Not as your husband, not as someone with any claim on you, just as someone who used to be your friend, who wants the chance to be your friend again. Maybe more, if you ever want that, but only if you want it. The choice is entirely yours. It always should have been. He stepped back from the podium as reporters shouted questions, but he didn't answer any of them. He walked back into the building, leaving chaos in his wake. Lucia and I sat in stunned silence as the news networks erupted with analysis. Headlines were already forming. Mafia boss admits fault in public apology, and Salvatore Bianchi's unprecedented confession. Well, Lucia said finally. He actually did it. I couldn't speak. I was crying openly now, years of pain and anger and hope tangling together in my chest. He'd done exactly what I'd asked. More than what I'd asked. He'd made himself vulnerable in front of the entire city, had risked his reputation, his power, his carefully constructed image. For me. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The cafe on Westwood Street. Thursday at 3 p.m. Only if you want to. No pressure, no expectations. Just coffee and conversation. S.I. stared at the message for a long time. What are you going to do? Lucia asked gently. I thought about the girl I'd been a week ago, walking down the aisle in a dress that felt like a cage. I thought about the moment I'd slapped Salvatore, the moment I'd chosen myself over everything I'd been taught to want. I thought about these last 3 days of freedom, of rediscovering who I was without anyone else's expectations weighing me down. And I thought about the man who'd just stood in front of cameras and admitted he was wrong. Who'd offered me complete freedom, even knowing I might use it to walk away forever. I'm going to meet him, I said slowly, not because I owe him anything, not because I've forgiven him, but because I owe it to myself to see if this is real, to see if people really can change. Thursday afternoon arrived cold and clear, the kind of day where the city looked sharp and clean, every edge defined. I'd spent an hour choosing what to wear, finally settling on jeans and a sweater, casual, comfortable, mine. Not the designer dresses Salvatore had filled my closet with, not the image of who I was supposed to be, just me. Lucia hugged me at the door. You have your phone? Yes, Mom, I teased. I'm serious. If anything feels wrong, if he pressures you at all, you call me immediately. I will, I promise. The cafe on Westwood Street was small and quiet, the kind of place that had been there for decades, unchanged by the city's evolution around it. It was neutral territory, not Salvatore's neighborhood or mine, just a space between. I arrived precisely at 3 and paused outside, watching through the window. Salvatore was already there, sitting at a corner table, his back to the wall. Old habits from a dangerous life. But he wasn't on his phone or reviewing papers. He was sitting, waiting, his hands wrapped around a coffee cup. He looked different. Still handsome, still powerful in that indefinable way that made people notice him, but softer somehow, more human. I took a breath and walked inside. He stood immediately when he saw me, a gesture of respect that felt genuine rather than performative. Isabella, thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure I would either, I admitted. We sat, and for a moment, neither of us knew what to say. The silence wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it was heavy with everything unspoken. I watched your press conference, I said finally. And it was brave, risky, probably stupid from a business perspective. He smiled slightly. My mother used all those words too. Among others, I won't repeat. How bad is the fallout? Honestly, worse than I expected. 2 business partners have pulled out of deals. My uncle is furious and threatening to challenge my leadership. Half the family thinks I've lost my mind. He paused. But the other half, the ones I actually respect, have told me it's the most honest thing I've ever done. I sipped my coffee, studying him. You could have handled this privately. Annulled the marriage quietly, saved face, moved on. I could have. But that wouldn't have been what you asked for. And more importantly, it wouldn't have been what you deserved. He met my eyes. You wanted proof. Real proof that I'd changed. Words are easy. Public accountability is harder. It's still just a start, I said carefully. One speech doesn't erase 6 months of— I know, he interrupted gently. I'm not expecting it to. I'm not expecting anything, actually. I just wanted the chance to sit here with you, like we used to, before everything got complicated. I remembered those days, late nights in college, talking about everything and nothing, before his father died and the weight of the empire fell on his shoulders. Before I became a strategic asset rather than just a person. Do you remember the night we met? I asked suddenly. Salvatore's expression softened. Of course. You were 13, arguing with your cousin about whether The Godfather romanticized the Mafia. You said it was a propaganda film disguised as art. I laughed, surprised he remembered. You told me I was wrong. And you told me I was an idiot who'd bought into my own family's mythology. I can't believe you didn't hate me after that. Are you kidding? That was the moment I knew you were different. Everyone else in that room was terrified of saying the wrong thing around the families. But you didn't care. You just said what you thought was true. He shook his head. I'd never met anyone like you. The memory hung between us, sweet and painful. What happened to us? I asked quietly. We used to be able to talk about anything. We used to be friends. I happened to us, Salvatore said, his voice heavy with regret. When my father died, I convinced myself I had to become him to survive. Cold, strategic, untouchable. I pushed away everything that made me vulnerable, including you, especially you, because you were the one person who could actually hurt me. So you decided to hurt me first? No. I decided to pretend you couldn't. Hurt me by turning what we had into something transactional, something I could control. He looked down at his hands. It was the coward's way out. And I'm sorry. I wanted to stay angry. Anger was safer than hope. But sitting here, listening to him, I could see the truth in his eyes, the genuine remorse. The man is struggling to unlearn years of self-protection. I need you to understand something, I said. Even if we try this, even if we see if there's something worth rebuilding, I'm not going to be the wife you imagined. I'm not going to stand quietly beside you at events. I'm not going to pretend to be okay with how you make your living. I'm not going to be decorative or obedient or any of the things a mafia wife is supposed to be. Good, he said. I don't want that. I never actually wanted that. I just thought I was supposed to. I want to go back to school, finish my degree, maybe go to law school. His eyebrows rose. Law school? I'm thinking about becoming a defense attorney. Someone has to make sure people like you follow the rules. I'd said it as a challenge, expecting him to bristle, to show the first sign of the controlling man he'd been. Instead, he laughed, a real laugh, warm and genuine. You would be terrifying in a courtroom. I love it. You might not love it when I'm cross-examining your associates. Then I'll make sure my associates stay on the right side of the law. He leaned forward. Isabella, I meant what I said. I don't want to control your life. I want to support it. Whatever you want to do, whoever you want to be, I want to be the person who helps make that possible, not the person who stands in your way. I searched his face for the lie, for the moment when the mask would slip. But all I saw was sincerity. This is going to be hard, I warned. I'm going to question everything. I'm going to push back. I'm going to need space and time and constant reassurance that you respect my autonomy. I know. And there will be days when I'm still angry about everything that happened. Days when I don't trust you. Days when I consider walking away. I understand. And you have to be okay with all of that. You have to prove, every single day, that this isn't just an act, that you've actually changed. Salvatore reached across the table, his hand palm up, an offering rather than a demand. I will spend every day for the rest of my life proving it, if that's what it takes. I looked at his hand, at the choice he was offering me. 6 months ago, he would have taken my hand without asking. A week ago, he would have demanded I take his. But now he was waiting, letting me choose. Slowly, I placed my hand in his. His fingers closed gently around mine, and I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but possibility. The fragile beginning of something that might, with time and work and honesty, become real. "So where do we start?" I asked. "How about we start here?" he suggested. "Coffee once a week, neutral location. We talk. We get to know each other again without the weight of families, expectations, or alliances. Just two people figuring out if they still like each other." "Once a week," I agreed. "And I'm paying for my own coffee." He smiled. I wouldn't have it any other way. We sat there for 2 hours, talking about everything except business, families, or our complicated past. We talked about books, movies, and the city's changing skyline. We debated politics, argued about art, and discovered that we still made each other laugh. When it was time to leave, Salvatore walked me outside but didn't try to follow me home. "Same time next week?" he asked. "Maybe. I'll text you." "I'll wait to hear from you." He paused, then added, "Isabella, thank you for giving me this chance. I know I don't deserve it." "You're right," I said honestly. "You don't. But I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for me. Because I want to see if the man I used to care about is still in there somewhere. I hope I don't disappoint you." "Me too." I walked away, feeling his eyes on my back, but when I turned to look, he was already getting into his car and giving me space and keeping his word. My phone buzzed with a text from Lucia. "How did it go?" I typed back. It went. "We're trying. I'll tell you everything when I get home." As I walked through the city, I realized something had changed. The streets no longer felt like a cage. They felt like a possibility. Because I'd chosen to be here, I'd decided to give Salvatore a chance. And most importantly, I'd chosen myself, my worth, my autonomy, my right to make my own decisions. The city lights flickered on as dusk fell, casting everything in a warm glow of gold and shadow. I thought about the girl in the wedding dress, slapping a Mafia boss in front of hundreds of people. I thought about how terrified I'd been, how certain I was that I'd made the worst mistake of my life. But maybe it hadn't been a mistake. Perhaps it had been the moment everything changed. The moment I stopped accepting the life I was given and started fighting for the life I wanted. I didn't know if things would work out with Salvatore. I wasn't sure if he could truly change or if I could ever fully trust him again. But I knew that whatever happened, I would be okay, because I'd learned the most important lesson of all. I belonged to myself, and no one, not Salvatore, not my family, not the city or its expectations, could take that away from me ever again. 6 months can feel like a lifetime or a moment, depending on what you're building. For Salvatore and me, it was both. We met for coffee every Thursday at 3, without fail. Sometimes we talked for hours. Sometimes we barely made it past small talk before old wounds resurfaced, and we had to take a break. It wasn't easy. It wasn't neat. But it was real. Salvatore kept his word in ways that constantly surprised me. When I enrolled in law school, he didn't try to influence my choice of schools or discourage me from studying criminal defense. When I needed space, he gave it without complaint. When I pushed back against something he said, he listened instead of arguing. It wasn't perfect. There were setbacks. There were moments when his old instincts surfaced. A flash of possessiveness. A desire to solve my problems without being asked. But the difference was that he had finally caught himself. Now he apologized. Now he has actually changed his behavior instead of just promising to. The city watched our strange courtship with fascination. The Mafia boss and the runaway bride, navigating a relationship that looked nothing like what anyone expected. Some people thought I was crazy for giving him another chance. Others admired what they saw as a fairy tale redemption. I didn't care what they thought. I was too busy rebuilding myself to worry about anyone else's opinion. Law school was everything I'd hoped. Challenging, engaging, infuriating, perfect. I threw myself into my studies, into understanding the systems that govern the city, into learning how to fight for justice in a world that often seemed designed to prevent it. Lucia remained my constant, my reminder of who I was outside of any relationship. We moved into an apartment together near campus, a space that was entirely mine, decorated how I wanted, filled with my books and my dreams and my future. Salvatore never once suggested I move in with him, never pressured me to spend more time together than I wanted. He was learning, slowly but genuinely, what it meant to love someone without trying to control them. In the 3rd month, I asked him about his business. I need to know exactly what you do, all of it. The legal parts and the non-legal parts. If we're going to keep doing this, I can't have secrets between us. He'd gone pale, but nodded. Over several difficult conversations, he told me everything. The legitimate businesses, the gray areas, the deals that crossed lines were not something he was proud of. I didn't like all of it, most of it actually, but I appreciated his honesty. I'm working on transitioning everything to legal operations, he said. It's slow, complicated, dangerous even, but I want to build something I'm not ashamed of, something that doesn't require people to fear me. Why? I asked. Because I want to be someone you can be proud of, someone who deserves you. In month 4, we had our first real fight since the wedding. I'd written a paper for class arguing for stricter RICO prosecutions against organized crime families. When Salvatore read it, I'd shown it to him, testing his commitment to my independence. His jaw had clenched. You're essentially arguing for my arrest, he said tightly. I'm arguing for justice. If that means people who break the law face consequences, yes. Even me, especially you. If you're really trying to change, you need to make things right for what you've already done. We'd sat in tense silence for a long moment. I watched him wrestle with it. His pride, his self-preservation instincts, the old Salvatore who would have seen this as betrayal. Then slowly the tension left his shoulders. You're right, he said quietly. You're absolutely right. And that terrifies me, because I don't know how to make right the things I've done, but I want to try. That night marked a shift. We started having more complex conversations. About morality, about legacy, about what it meant to truly change when you'd built an empire on foundations you were now questioning. It wasn't comfortable, but it was honest. In the 5th month, my family reached out. My mother called, her voice stiff and formal. Your father wants to meet with you. With both of you. I'd been dreading this. I agreed, but only on my terms. A restaurant of my choosing, with Lucia present, and with the understanding that I could leave at any time. The dinner was awkward, painful, and necessary. My father barely looked at Salvatore, the alliance he'd built now in ruins. My mother kept trying to smooth things over, to pretend the wedding had never happened, to hint that maybe we could try again, properly this time. No, I said firmly. Salvatore and I are figuring things out on our own terms. Not for an alliance, not for business, not for anyone but ourselves. If you can't accept that, then we have nothing to discuss. My father had looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something shift in his eyes. Maybe respect, maybe just recognition that I was no longer the obedient daughter he'd raised. You've changed, he said. Yes, I have. I'm not sure I like it. You don't have to, but you do have to respect it, or you don't get to be part of my life. It wasn't a reconciliation, but it was a start, a redrawing of boundaries on my terms. By month 6, something had shifted between Salvatore and me too. The coffee meetings had expanded, walks through the city, dinners where we lingered over conversation, long phone calls that stretched past midnight. We were building something new from the ground up, and I found myself looking forward to seeing him in a way I hadn't expected. One Thursday, instead of our usual cafe, Salvatore picked me up and drove to the outskirts of the city. I want to show you something, If you're comfortable with that, I was curious enough to agree. He pulled up to a construction site, a large building being renovated, workers everywhere. What is this? It's going to be a community center, he said. After our conversations about making things right, I started thinking about what that actually means. This neighborhood has needed resources for years, including after-school programs, job training, and legal aid services. I bought the building. I'm funding the renovation. It opens in 3 months. I stared at him. You're serious? Completely. I can't undo the harm I've caused. But I can try to do better going forward. This is part of that. He paused. I was hoping, and you can absolutely say no, but I was hoping you might be willing to help set up the legal aid portion. Maybe supervise some law students doing pro bono work once you're further into your program. It was precisely the kind of thing I'd want to be involved in. And he'd thought of it and planned it, made it real. I'd love to, I said, my voice catching. He smiled, and it reached his eyes. Good. Because I named you as the director, your name's already on the paperwork. You did what? I want this to be yours, your project. I'm just funding it. Everything else, the vision, the programs, the direction, that's all you, if you want it. I looked at the building, at the possibilities it represented, then back at Salvatore. You really have changed. I'm trying. Every day. That night, for the first time since the wedding, I kissed him. Not because I had to, not as part of a performance, but because I wanted to. Because somewhere in the past 6 months, I'd started to believe in the possibility of us again. It was soft and tentative and full of all the history between us. The pain and the hope and the careful rebuilding. When we pulled apart, Salvatore rested his forehead against mine. I love you, he said quietly. I need you to know that. No expectations, no pressure, just the truth. I'm not ready to say it back yet, I admitted. I know. And that's okay. I'll wait. What if I'm never ready? Then I'll love you anyway because that's what you deserve. Someone who loves you without conditions. I pulled back to look at him properly. You understand this doesn't mean we're going back to how things were, right? We're not getting married again. We're not moving in together. We're not, Isabella. He took my hands. I'm not interested in going back to how things were. I'm interested in building something new. Whatever that looks like, at whatever pace you need. I'm not trying to rush you. I'm just grateful you're still here. We stood there in the fading light, the city sprawling around us, and I felt something settle in my chest. Not certainty. I'd learned that certainty was overrated. But trust, the fragile, growing trust that maybe this could actually work. Now, standing in our usual cafe on another Thursday afternoon, I watched Salvatore arrive right on time. 6 months of meetings, and he'd never been late once. It was a small thing, but small things mattered. He sat down across from me, and I slid a paper across the table. What's this? He asked. My first semester grades. All A's! His face lit up with genuine pride. Isabella, that's amazing. I knew you could do it, but there's more. I've been offered a position with a civil rights law firm for next summer. It's just an internship, but it's exactly what I want to be doing. That's incredible. He reached for my hand, then paused, still learning to ask first. I gave it to him. I couldn't have done it without the space you've given me, I admitted. These past 6 months, you've let me figure out who I am outside of us. That's the greatest gift you could have given me. You did all the work. I just got out of your way. That was the work, I said. Learning when to get out of the way. Learning that love isn't about control. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, and then Salvatore cleared his throat. I have something to tell you, too. I met with the district attorney last week, quietly, through intermediaries. My heart started pounding. What? I told them I want to cooperate. Not immunity, I don't deserve that. But I want to provide information on my family's past operations in exchange for leniency for the people who were forced into situations they didn't choose. The kids who grew up in this life without options. People like me. I stared at him, stunned. Salvatore, do you understand what you're risking? I do. My family will see it as betrayal. I'll lose relationships, probably. Maybe everything I've built. But you were right. I can't just say I've changed. I have to prove it. And that means taking responsibility. You could go to prison. I know. But I'll do it knowing I tried to make things right. And I'll do it knowing that even if I lose everything else, I've become someone worth knowing. Someone you might actually be able to love someday. Tears burned in my eyes. This was real. This wasn't a performance or a manipulation. This was a man genuinely trying to become better, regardless of the cost. "I'm scared," he admitted, his voice rough. "I'm scared of what happens next. Scared I'll lose you anyway. Scared that I'll never be able to fully make up for what I've done. But I'm more scared of becoming my father, building an empire on fear and calling it a legacy. I don't want that anymore." I stood up, moved around the table, and wrapped my arms around him. He buried his face in my shoulder, and I felt him shake. "I'm so proud of you," I whispered. "This is the bravest thing you've ever done." "You're the one who made me brave," he said. That slap, it didn't just wake me up. It saved me. We held each other in that cafe, the city moving around us, indifferent to our small moment of transformation. But it wasn't small, not to us. It was everything. When we finally pulled apart, I made a decision. I'm not ready to say I love you yet, but I'm ready to say I'm falling, slowly, carefully, but I'm falling. His smile was radiant. That's more than enough. That's everything. 6 months after the slap that changed everything, I stood on a different rooftop, not running this time, but choosing to be there. Salvatore stood beside me, not commanding my presence, but invited into it. The city stretched below us, the same town that had felt like a prison on my wedding night. But it looked different now, full of possibilities instead of threats. Mine, not because anyone had given it to me, but because I'd claimed it. Do you ever regret it? Salvatore asked. The slap? Everything that came after? I thought about it honestly. No, it was the moment I chose myself. That's not something I can regret. Even knowing all the pain that came with it? Especially knowing that, because the pain meant I was alive. I was fighting. I was becoming who I was supposed to be. He nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I'm grateful. You destroyed the life I thought I wanted and gave me the chance to build one I actually want. What do you want? I asked. Really want for the future? He was quiet for a long moment, considering. I want to be someone you're proud to know. I want to dismantle what my father built and create something that actually helps people. I want to earn your love, not demand it. And I want to prove, every single day for the rest of my life, that people can change. That's a lot of wants. I know. What about you? What do you want? I looked out at the city, at my future spreading before me. I want to finish law school. I want to fight for those who have no one fighting for them. I want to maintain my independence, my autonomy, my sense of self. I want relationships built on respect, not obligation. And I want to see where this, I gestured between us, goes. Without rushing, without pressure. Just seeing, he agreed. I can do that. A cool breeze picked up, carrying the scent of rain and possibility. I thought about the girl in the wedding dress, terrified and defiant. I thought about the woman I'd become. Stronger, clearer, more certain of who I was and what I deserved. Thank you, Salvatore said quietly. For what? For being brave enough to slap me. For being strong enough to walk away. For being generous enough to give me another chance. For showing me that real strength isn't about control. It's about letting go. I leaned against the railing, feeling the city's energy pulse through the metal. You know what the irony is? You told me I'd never leave this city. And you were right. But not for the reasons you meant. I'm not staying because you won't let me leave. I'm staying because I choose to. Because this is my city too. And I'm going to make it better. We could make it better, he suggested carefully. Together. If you want, I considered the offer. 6 months ago, I would have heard it as a trap. Now I heard it as an invitation, a partnership instead of a takeover. Together, I agreed. But as equals. Always as equals. Always, he promised. The rain began to fall, soft and cleansing. We stood there together, letting it wash over us, washing away the past and making space for whatever came next. My phone buzzed. A text from Lucia. Dinner tonight? I want to hear everything about how coffee went. I smiled and typed back. Dinner sounds perfect. And Lucia? Thank you for everything. Her response was immediate. That's what friends are for. Love you. I put my phone away and turned to Salvatore. I need to go. Dinner with Lucia, of course. Same time next week? Actually, I said, making a decision. How about Tuesday? I have a break between classes. We could grab lunch. His eyes lit up. I'd love that. We walked to the elevator together, and when it arrived, I paused before stepping in. Salvatore, yes? I'm glad you came to Lucia's apartment that night. I'm glad you didn't give up. I'm glad you chose to change. I'm glad you gave me the chance. The elevator doors closed between us, and I watched him disappear, already looking forward to Tuesday, to the slow building of something real and honest and chosen. When I reached the street, the rain had stopped, leaving the city clean and bright. I walked through the wet streets with my head up, my stride confident. People moved around me, oblivious to the quiet revolution that had happened in my life. But I wasn't oblivious. I carried it with me, the knowledge that I'd been tested and hadn't broken, that I'd demanded respect and received it, that I'd chosen myself first, and in doing so, had created space for genuine love to grow. The city lights reflected in the puddles, creating mirrors of gold and silver. I thought about how different everything looked now, how much had changed in 6 months. Not just with Salvatore, but with me, with who I was becoming. I wasn't the girl who'd been afraid to speak up anymore. I wasn't the woman who'd accepted less than she deserved. I was someone new, someone stronger, someone free. And if Salvatore continued to prove himself worthy, if he kept choosing growth over control, respect over possession, honesty over image, then maybe, someday, we'd build something beautiful together. But even if we didn't, I'd be okay, because I'd learned the most important lesson. My worth wasn't determined by who loved me or how. It was determined by how I loved myself, by the choices I made, by the boundaries I set, by the life I built with my own hands. I pulled out my phone and sent one more text to Salvatore. Thank you for learning what love really means. Thank you for choosing to be better. Keep going. I'm rooting for you. His response came quickly. I'll spend every day earning that faith. Thank you for seeing the man I'm trying to become, not just the man I was. I smiled and put my phone away, continuing my walk through the city. My city. The place where I'd lost myself and found myself and learned what it meant to be free, truly. The night was young, full of possibility. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I was excited about the future, not because someone else was planning it for me, but because it was mine to create. I thought about that moment at the wedding, my hand connecting with Salvatore's face, the sharp crack echoing through the ballroom, the stunned silence that followed. Everyone had thought it was the end of something, but they were wrong. It was the beginning. They say the city never sleeps, but that's not quite true. It rests, it breathes, it changes. And if you're lucky and brave enough to demand it, it gives you the space to change too. My name is Isabella Moretti, and 6 months ago I slapped a Mafia boss at my own wedding and walked away from the life everyone said I should want. Some people think it was the craziest thing I've ever done. They're wrong. The craziest thing I've ever done is choosing to come back and choosing to see if the man who tried to own me could learn what it means to love someone truly. Choosing to believe that people, even influential, dangerous people, can change if they want it badly enough. I don't know how this story ends. Maybe Salvatore and I can build something real. Perhaps we don't. Maybe he proves himself worthy of trust, or possibly he falls back into old patterns, and I have to walk away again. But whatever happens, I know one thing for sure. I'll be okay because I've learned to choose myself first, and that's the kind of power no one can ever take away. So if you're out there, reading this, living a life that doesn't fit, trapped in expectations that suffocate you, controlled by people who claim to love you, I want you to know something. You have the power to walk away. You have the right to demand better. You have the strength to rebuild your life on your own terms. It won't be easy. It will be terrifying. People will judge you. Some will say you're making a mistake. Others will try to convince you to go back to what's familiar, even if it's killing you slowly. But you are worth fighting for. Your freedom is worth defending. Your dreams are worth pursuing, and sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is slap away the hand that's holding you down, literally or figuratively, and walk toward the life you deserve. The city taught me that. Salvatore taught me that, though not in the way he intended. And that moment, that single moment of defiance in front of 300 witnesses, taught me that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. I still carry the memory of how my palm burned afterwards, how my heart raced. I felt terrified and exhilarated all at once. It was the moment I stopped being someone's possession and became my own person, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. So here's what I want you to remember. You are not property. You are not a prize to be won or a problem to be solved. You are a person with agency, with worth, with the fundamental right to choose your own path. If someone truly loves you, they'll respect that. They'll celebrate your strength, not try to diminish it. They'll support your growth, not stunt it. They'll give you freedom, not a cage, no matter how golden. And if they can't do that, then they don't deserve you. Not your time, not your energy, not your presence. Walk away. Slap if you have to, run if you must. But choose yourself. Always choose yourself. Because at the end of the day, the only person who has to live your life is you. And you deserve a life you're proud of, a life you've chosen, a life that's authentically, unapologetically yours. The city lights are coming on now, painting the world in gold and shadow. Somewhere out there, Salvatore is discovering the true meaning of love without control. Somewhere my family is learning to respect boundaries they never thought I'd set. Somewhere other women are watching my story and finding the courage to write their own. And I'm here, free, strong, and finally myself. The Mafia boss said I'd never leave this city. He was right. But not because he wouldn't let me, because I chose to stay, on my terms, in my time, for my reasons, and that makes all the difference. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for walking with me through the fear, the anger, the hope, and the slow, difficult work of rebuilding. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt trapped, controlled, or diminished, I want you to know you're not alone. Your feelings are valid. Your desire for freedom is legitimate, and your worth is not determined by anyone else's opinion of you. If you enjoyed this journey, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything and helps me continue telling stories about people who fight for themselves, who demand better, who refuse to accept less than they deserve. Leave a comment below and tell me, have you ever had a moment that changed everything? A moment when you chose yourself over what everyone expected? I read every comment, and I'd love to hear your story. Because everyone deserves to be free. Everyone deserves to be respected. Everyone deserves to choose their own path. Until next time, remember, you are stronger than you know, braver than you believe, and worthy of a love that celebrates you, not controls you. Keep fighting for yourself. Keep demanding better. Keep choosing your own destiny. The city and the world is waiting for you to claim it.